Alright guys, this is the Zeta fork lowering kit for the CRF450L. It lowers the forks by, it says 30 millimeters, so this is the stock spring tower and this is a new Zeta tower, so you can see it's a bit shorter. And this part goes into the dampener rod. You have to disassemble the dampener and take the dampener rod out and swap this part out for a part in here, and I'll try to do a little bit of video on that. First I'll have fork oil all over my hands, and not sure if I want to do that, but yeah, that's basically what you have to do, is pull that dampener rod apart, put that spacer inside your dampener rod, and then put the new spring tower on there, and then it internally lowers the forks by 30 millimeters. Okay, at this point I've taken off the lock nut. Well, first I removed the head out of this dampener tube. Alright, pull the head out of there, drain the oil, and I removed this threaded piece. Now I'm going to use some brake cleaning, clean off these threads, and I wrap this with a little bit of electrical tape since I have to pull it out of the dampener assembly, and that's supposed to keep it from messing up the seal that's in here. Okay guys, I just got this little red sleeve all the way down into the bottom of the fork tube using half-inch piece of PVC pipe, and I used it to get this little sleeve started here, and then once it started going down, I used the PVC pipe like a slide hammer and just bounce the dampener assembly up and down into it, knock the sleeve all the way into the bottom. So that's the internal spacer to your dampener rod. Then of course this external spacer is easy to put on here because it just goes here for your spring part. So that part's done on this shot. So this part about the clearance between the fork adjuster on the bottom here and the jam nut on the dampener rod, doing this to spec from the Honda manual does not work out. There's no clearance there, and the Zeta manual does not tell you does not mention this clearance at all. So right here, the fork nut and jam nut are too close to each other. Well, I backed it off now. There should be a gap. I think that's too much, but the clearance purpose is to make sure that the clicker here on top is engaging the push rod that's inside of here. Because if this is too far out, it's not going to engage the push rod and make the adjustments down in the fork. So I think that should be a pretty straightforward fix. To say the least, this is a very messy job. Paper towel soaked with fork oil everywhere. Fork oil spilled on the stem floor. Had a fork oil accident here. The fork shot fork oil all over my shirt there, ruining that too. It's all over me, arms, chest, legs. Yeah, so yeah, if you don't want to take a bath in fork oil, you may want to just let a shop do this kind of work for you. But anyway, here's a 450L with the Zeta fork lowering kit. It drops the front forks by 30 millimeters, reducing the travel and full extension by 30 millimeters. On the rear, I have the Soupys adjustable lowering links. The way the bike's set now, the rear swing arm full extension is 2 inches shorter than stock, so it's much easier to get on, and it doesn't, as far as handling, the bike's actually a little more stable. I think lowering the rear 2 inches and the front a little over an inch makes the bike have more rake and trail, so it handles a little better, especially in sand and slick mud and stuff like that. Just a little less responsive on the front. But the front forks and rear suspension still seem to work great. Dampening, no pogo stick or super harsh ride or anything going on like that. I also lowered the front forks in the triple trees you can lower those, it looks like about a 1/4 inches off of 7 millimeters before you run into the tapered part of the front forks. So the stock bike calls for the forks to be adjusted to the top line, but I've got my forks pushed up to the second line, which lowers the fork about a 1/4 inch. And right here, the taper starts. So this is right on the edge of the flat part, so it's not in the taper. Here's the Soupys lowering link. It's got a turnbuckle, 2 jam nuts. To get to this, you have to take the kickstand mount off. The brake pedal, I had to take it loose to be able to get these bolts out, but it had to take the brake loose because the spring gets in the way of getting this bolt out. So skid plate clearance, and this is with the bike sitting up without me on it, just balancing the bike on under its own weight. So it's 11 inches of clearance under the skid plate and 10 inches of clearance up under the shock link. And this ground clearance actually increases because when you load the suspension, this part of the link goes up. Lowering the overall ride height by 2 inches really didn't take a whole lot of weight. Lowering the front really didn't change the seat height a whole lot. The rear really did most of the work. If you didn't lower the front forks, you'd get a lot more rake and trail, making the bike handle, not handle very much like a dirt bike. I'm fairly short, like 5'8" with a 30-inch inseam, wearing tennis shoes. So hop on here, see I'm sitting centered on the bike. But yeah, my feet are, it's easy to be on the balls of my feet. Got good stability and some tennis shoes on. It's a slight shift in my weight over, and I'm flat-footed on either side, so much better for me. This seat concept's Comfort XL, the extra wide seat, and I don't find the seat gets in the way standing up. I really like the seat. It's comfortable, nice looking seat and all. So I do have the Zeta shock lowering shim that would lower the ride height on the back of the bike by 30 millimeters, but it's a pain in the butt to get the shock out. You basically have to take the subframe off, the airbox out, and the lowering link's working really good for me, so I really don't want to have to go through all that. Originally lowered the bike 2.5 inches, and you can see here now I've got it at 2, but you figure all your sag and your actual sitting on the bike with the proper sag, the ride height is only a 1/4 inch difference, so 31.5 height when you're sitting on it versus 31.75, so it's not that much difference to give you another 1/2 inch of suspension travel and reduce the rake and trail a little bit for a little bit more. Important part is the seat height when the suspension gets fully extended, because that's where the bike starts falling over and throws you off. Like when you're sitting on it, it's fine, but when you start leaning over and you unload the suspension, then the bike extends itself out, so it's like a spring, the spring's pushing you up and making your ground, making you lose your footing, where reducing the full extension by 2 inches with a 30-inch inseam like I have makes a huge difference in off-road handling. And I'm not stumbling around, falling over, and trying to catch the bike. Now I can just stab a foot down and plant a foot real easy and keep the bike upright a lot better. So yeah, I would recommend the Soupys lowering link and the Zeta internal fork lowering kit. Like both of these made this bike a lot more user friendly for my short self. That's all I got on it, guys.